Hi everyone, my name is Steve Lillyston and you're tuned into Our Library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries from all around the Wairarapa to let you know about some of the new books coming into the library in the coming months so that you can get in quick and place a reservation if you're interested. Now, Our Library is being broadcast to you today on Arrow 92.7 FM, your community access radio channel, and on Wairarapa TV on Freeview Channel 41. This channel is broadcast live on the third Friday of each month at 3:30 and repeated on the fourth Friday again at 3:30. So let's get started. Now, first off, I'd just like to talk about some announcements from the libraries. So first up, I've got a couple of comments from Annette Beattie. She's the Library Services Manager down at the Wairarapa Library Service, that's in South Wairarapa. So just a couple of things here. I guess the big announcement is that the Wairarapa Library Service is starting the process of changing its library management system. That's quite a big deal. So keep an eye out for information as it comes out in the libraries and newspapers throughout September and October. And one of the really big changes is that the Wairarapa Library Service is joining the Smart Collaboration. Now, what this means is that you'll be able to borrow, return and reserve items at any one of the 26 libraries in Masterton, Carterton, South Wairarapa, all the four libraries in South Wairarapa, including Carterton, Lower Hutt City, Porora and Kapiti, as well as the Whatâ and Whitireia Polytechs. So that's a really big deal. Marston's had that for a while. They've been on a smart library system for a while. But WLS, the Wairarapa Library Service, is joining that system, the collaboration, which is great. So it means wherever you live in Wairarapa, you'll be able to use all 5 libraries with one library card. So I think that's pretty exciting news. The other thing is that right now all the libraries, if you're not already aware, all the libraries in Wairarapa are open at level 2. Same COVID restrictions apply, of course. You have to wear a mask when you go there. You have to scan in, keep your 2-metre distance and so on. Now, the thing is that joining a library can be done in person or online, and it's free. So that's a really good really good thing to know. Once you have a library card, you can access all resources online for free, with the exception of Beamer Film, which Marston has, but not WS. All other resources are offered across all 5 sites, library services. So all libraries can be found online at their websites, Facebook pages, or via phone. So, and the other thing is Libby, which I've been using since we've had lockdown, not being able to get access to books. I found Libby has been really good. That's the e-reader, so you can take out books, e-books from the library, check them out, read them, and return them all from the comfort of your armchair. So that's quite exciting. That's Libby. All right. And Marston Library, Tiffany from Marston Library, also wants to remind everybody that COVID level 2 restrictions apply. Keep your distance, wear a mask, sign in, all that good stuff. But unfortunately, there'll be no programs until level 1. And Marston does have a number of wonderful programs, as does the Wairarapa Library Service too. But these won't be available while we're still at level 2, for obvious reasons, I guess. Marston Library can also connect you and your family with low-cost internet. Contact them for Skinny Jump, which is the low-cost internet, for $5 per 30 gigabytes. And it's the same for the Wairarapa Library Service. In fact, all the libraries offer Skinny Jump, which is the which is the inexpensive internet connectivity. You can join Marston Library online for free, access all the resources, newspapers, using Press Reader and so on. So it's a wonderful facility. All the libraries are wonderful facilities, and you should take advantage of it. If you're not already, its membership is free, and there are no fines anymore. They've just dropped that just in the last couple of months, I think. Some libraries have had it for a while, some haven't. But all libraries now, there are no such things as fines, and I believe they're looking at a system whereby they will wipe all existing fines. So if you did have fines, these are now wiped. You can go back to the library and resume borrowing books. All right, so that's enough from me for our sponsors and so on. I'd like to go through some of the books now, as I do each month. First off, I've got some fiction which I'd like to talk to you about. So in no particular order. This one's called Termination Shock, and it's by Neil Stephenson. Neil Stephenson's sweeping, prescient new novel transports readers to a near-future world where the greenhouse effect has inexorably resulted in a whirling dervish troposphere of superstorms, rising sea levels, global flooding, merciless heat waves, and virulent, deadly pandemics. Sort of sounds like where we are now, doesn't it? One man has a big idea for reversing global warming. A master plan perhaps best described as elemental, but will it work? And just as important, what are the consequences for the planet and all of humanity should it all be applied? As only Stevenson can, Termination Shock sounds a clarion alarm, ponders potential solutions and dire risks, and wraps it all together in an exhilarating, witty, mind-expanding, speculative adventure. So that's Termination Shock by Neil Stephenson. Neil Stephenson, the science fiction author, was born on October 31st, 1959 in Maryland, in the USA. He graduated from Boston University in 1981 with a BA in geography and a minor in physics. So he's very well educated. And his first novel, The Big U, was published in 1984. It received little attention and stayed out of print until he allowed it to be reprinted in 2001. So that's a little bit of background on Neil Stephenson. Termination Shock by Neil Stephenson. Next up, there's this one's called Ask No Questions, and this is by Claire Allen. 25 years ago on Halloween night, 8-year-old Kelly Doherty went missing while out trick-or-treating with friends. Her body was found 3 days later, floating face down on the banks of the Cregan Reservoir by two of her young classmates. It was a crime that rocked Derry to the core. Journalist Ingrid Devlin is investigating, but someone doesn't want her to know the truth. As she digs further, Ingrid starts to realise that the Doherty family are not as they seem. But will she expose what really happened that night before it's too late? So that's a bit of a thriller by Claire Allen. I'm not familiar with Claire Allen's work, but that sounds interesting. Claire Allen is a very popular and successful Northern Irish author who lives in Derry/Londonderry. She worked as a staff reporter on the Derry Journal for 17 years and wrote her first novel in 2006 to mark her 30th birthday. It was subsequently published and became an instant bestseller in 2007. It's called Rainy Days and Tuesdays. She wrote 7 further women's fiction novels between 2007 and 2015. And in 2016, when she turned 40, she decided to change genre and try a hand at domestic noir. And this novel is in that genre. Claire Allen still lives in Derry with her husband, 2 children, 2 cats, and a very spoiled puppy. So that's Ask No Questions by Claire Allen. Sounds good. I love the Irish authors, and that's a new Irish author to me, so I'm very interested in that one. Next up is Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Gulshan. The story begins in 1618 in the German Duchy of Württemberg. plague is spreading, the 30 Years' War has begun, and fear and suspicion are in the air throughout the Holy Roman Empire. In the small town of Leonberg, Katharina Kepler is accused of being a witch. Katharina is an illiterate widow, known by her neighbours for her herbal remedies and the success of her children, including her eldest, Johann, who is the imperial mathematician and renowned author of the Laws of Planetary Motion. Johann Kepler. I've lost my space now. It's enough to make everyone jealous, and Katharina has done herself no favours by being out and about and in everybody's business. Drawing on real historical documents, Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch will both provoke and entertain. The story of how a community becomes implicated in a collective aggression and historical fear is a tale for our time, don't we know it? Gauchin's bold new novel touchingly illuminates a society and a family undone by superstition, the state, and the mortal convulsions of history. That sounds really good. Rivka Gauchin is a 45-year-old Canadian-American writer born to Israeli academics who moved to Toronto in 1981. She graduated from Princeton in 1998 with a degree in English, and then in 2003 she got an MD from Mount Sinai with a focus on psychiatry and a Master of Fine Arts degree in 2006 from Columbia University. So you could say she's had a very good education. Incredibly interesting background, but the Canadian writers, there's some really interesting Canadian writers too. So that's a new one to me. She currently lives in New York. That's Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Gauchin. Worth looking into, I think. Now, next up, that's complete twister-rooney, complete turnaround here. This is The Fort by Adrian Goldsworthy. It's AD 105. Dacia, the Dacian kingdom, and Rome are at peace, but no one thinks that it will last. Sent to command an isolated fort beyond the Danube, Centurion Flavius Ferox consents that war is coming, but also knows that enemies may be closer to home. Many of the brigands under his command are former rebels and convicts, as likely to kill him as obey an order. And then there is Hadrian, the emperor's cousin, and a man with plans of his own. Very different. That's The Fort by Adrian Goldsworthy. A lot of writers like to write about ancient Rome, so it'd be interesting to see how he stands up against the Ben Kanes of this world and Jack White and a few others. Adrian Goldsworthy, born in England, 1969, attended Westbourne School, Penarth. He then read ancient and modern history at St John's College, Oxford, completing a PhD in ancient military history from Oxford, the university, in 1994. And that dissertation laid the foundation of his first book, The Roman Army at War, 100 BC to AD 200. He was appointed a junior research fellow at Cardiff University for 2 years, taught briefly at King's College, London, and was an assistant professor on the University of Notre Dame's London programme for 6 years. His expertise is in Roman history, but he also taught a course on the military history of the Second World War at the University of Notre Dame. So I think that's trying to say he knows his stuff. He's got a lot of, educated in that genre. So I would imagine what he doesn't know about it isn't worth knowing. That's The Fort by Adrian Goldsworthy. So if you've just tuned in, my name is Steve Lillyston and you're listening to Our Library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely people from the libraries all around Wairarapa to let you know about some of the many new books being introduced into the library in the coming months. And when I say some, we're talking there are hundreds of books that are introduced into the library every month. So I'm just giving you a smattering of the books that are coming in. And so I've already gone through 4 of the fiction. So I'll just go through some more here, just completely at random. This is called Count the Ways. This is by Joyce Maynard. Eleanor and Cam meet at a crafts fair in Vermont in the early 70s. She's an artist and writer. He makes wooden bowls. Within 4 years, they are parents to 3 children, 2 daughters and a red-headed son who fills his pockets with rocks, plays the violin and talks to God. To Eleanor, their New Hampshire farm provides everything she always wanted: summer nights watching Cam's softball games, snow days by the fire, and the annual tradition of making paper boats and cork people to launch in the brook every spring. Then comes a terrible accident caused by Cam's negligence. Unable to forgive him, Eleanor is consumed by bitterness, losing herself in her life as a mother, while Cam finds solace with a new young partner. Tracing the course of their lives through the gender transition of one child and another's choice to completely break with her mother, Joyce Maynard captures a family forced to confront essential, painful truths of its past and find redemption in its darkest hours. So that sounds a lot of intrigue in there, a lot of sounds like an interesting story. So Joyce Maynard, actually her real name's Daphne Joyce Maynard, born 1953, New Hampshire in the US. She's an American novelist and journalist and published her first book in 1981. She writes in many genres, so you may have heard of her in other genres, including young adult fiction and true crime. There you go. Her 6th novel, Labor Day, was adapted into the 2013 movie of the same name, which you may have seen, I haven't. For a brief period in 1972, she lived with J.D. Salinger, of Catcher in the Rye fame. You may have heard of him. And lots of controversy surrounds the letters that Salinger wrote to her, which I'm not going to go into right now. But it's a very interesting, controversial story at the time, which doesn't detract from the fact that Joyce Maynard is a very successful author and, by all counts, an extremely interesting figure. So let's Count the Ways by Joyce Maynard. Next up, The Vet from Snowy River by Stella Quinn. Vera de Rossi no longer believes in love, and thanks to her ex-boyfriend, she's also broke, jobless, and staring down the barrel of a court case that could land her in prison. Turning to her talent for baking, Vera opens a cafe in Hanrahan, a cosy tourist town in the foothills of the Snowy Mountains. Josh Cody, once Hanrahan's golden boy, escaped 16 years ago with gossip hard on his heels and a pregnant girlfriend in tow. Now he's back, a qualified veterinarian and a single dad with a lot to prove. A new start and a grumpy teenage daughter. It's a lot to juggle, but there's no room in his life for further complications. But that's before he walks into the Billy Button Cafe and meets its prickly owner. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? And that's an Australian novel, The Vet from Snowy River by Stella Quinn. Now, Stella Quinn is a multi-award-winning Australian author of contemporary romance and romantic suspense. She loves writing sweet, small-town romance with rural or western settings and quirky side characters you want to move in with. Her series include the indie-published Island Escape series, the small-town sweet romance Clementine Springs series, and she has recently joined Sweet Promise Press's Gold Coast Retrievers series. She loves writing stories that make readers happy. Stella Quinn believes romance, adventure and escape are the reasons we love to read. Her novels are sun-filled and sea-drenched. Love blooms under the palm trees of flower-flung islands. Say that fast. Or in the warm waters above sunken wrecks. A lovely writer. She sounds like fun. This is The Vet from Snowy River by Stella Quinn, an Australian, very successful Australian author. Now, this is a complete switch again. This is The Corner That Held Them. This is by Sylvia Townsend Warner. The nuns who enter a convent in medieval Norfolk are told to renounce the world, but the world still finds ways to trouble them. whether it is through fire, floods, pestilence, a collapsing spire, jealous rivalries, a priest with a secret, or a plague of caterpillars. Following their daily lives over 3 centuries, this masterpiece of historical fiction recreates a world run by women. Sylvia Townsend Warner's 1948 portrayal of a 14th century nunnery is widely considered to be one of the great historical novels of all time, which is one of the reasons I included this book. An occasionally hilarious ode to community living, it is also a poignant, delicate exploration of spirituality's relationship to the material world. So this is hardly what you would call a new novel, but I guess it's the reprint of a classic, and I thought that worth a mention if you've never heard of it. I've never heard of it. The Corner That Held Them by Sylvia Townsend Warner. So she was born in 1893, and she passed away in 1978. She was an English musicologist, novelist and poet, known for works such as Lolly Willows, Whether a Dove or a Seagull, and After the Death of Don Juan. In the 1970s, she became known as a significant writer of feminist or lesbian sentiment, and her novels were among the earlier ones to be revived by Virago Press. Very interesting woman, with a creditable body of work to her name, including 7 novels, 1 biography of novelist T.H. White, declared to be a masterpiece by the New York Times, and a number of short stories and poems. I thought that was fascinating. This is The Corner That Held Them by Sylvia Townsend Warner. Really interesting. And the last one is a complete switcheroo again. This is The Murder List by T.F. Muir. St Andrews, Scotland. When an elderly woman's naked body is found in her home, crucified to the floor, DCI Andy Gilchrist and his associate DS Jesse James, not Jesse James, find themselves in a hunt for a brutal serial killer. As the body count rises, suspicion falls on Tap McCrea, a career criminal recently released from prison after serving 15 years for a murder he swore he never committed. As Gilchrist begins to uncover the terrifying truth behind each of the killings, his worst fears are realised when he learns that McCrea is killing everyone involved in his murder trial. And it was Gilchrist who arrested McCrea all those years ago. Gilchrist knows it's up to him to find Tap McCrea before his own name is struck off the murder list. Ooh. So that's The Murder List by T.F. Muir. So again, it's interesting because T.F. Muir is a Scottish author, highly influential crime novelist. Frank Muir has become a renowned master of both T.F. Muir, Frank Muir, he's actually known as Frank Muir, has become a renowned master of both suspense and intrigue who is respected throughout the industry. Known for his gritty style that harks back almost to the hard-boiled classics of yesteryear, he published his first novel in 2007 and is particularly well known for his DCI Andy Gilchrist series, which features the eponymous Detective Chief Inspector. Born in Glasgow, T. Frank Muir was educated at Strathclyde University in Glasgow, where he gained a degree in civil engineering, of all things. And although his passions truly lay in crime literature, his skills as an engineer allowed him to travel and see the world, undertaking a variety of different professions globally. He's a dual citizen of the US and the UK. He now lives on the outskirts of Glasgow with his wife and 2 children. So we've had Canadian, Scottish, Irish, Australian, English, a selection of writings there. Scottish writings. I'm not that familiar with Scottish writings, although I have read a couple. But The Murder List by T.F. Muir, Frank Muir. Okay, so at this point I think I'll take a small music break, and when we come back I'll continue to let you know about some of the new books coming into the library, but this time we'll look at the non-fiction being introduced into Wairarapa libraries in the coming month. So now this is Alison Moyet with Falling, track 1 from her Essex album. If I can get the technology going. Right. Hi, welcome back, or if you've just tuned in, my name is Steve Lillyston and you're listening to Our Library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries around Wairarapa to let you know about some of the new books coming into the library in the coming months. And so just before the service break, music break, I covered some of the new fiction that's being introduced into your library, and now for a small sample of some of the new non-fiction just in. So first up is Fallen Idols, 12 Statues That Made History, and this is by Alex von Tunzelmann. A hugely entertaining and informative narrative on one of the key arguments raging across the globe, How does one honestly celebrate a country's past without knocking down celebrated heroes? The world has witnessed huge social and media discussions of what figures from the past one should or should not celebrate and commemorate with a statue. The recent removal of the statue of infamous slave transporter Edward Colston in Bristol still resonates in the UK as debates rage on race, inequality, politics and gender. Fallen Idols is constructive appraisal of the issues facing many towns and cities across the USA, the UK, Africa and to the old USSR as they struggle to decide how the commemoration and adoration of statues that they hold dear or despise can be resolved. And I'm sure you've seen that around the world in recent years, especially in the US. Number of slave traders and statues of slave traders and so on have been torn down to great joy on one side and to dismay on the other. Very interesting. It's a very topical subject. Fallen Idols, 12 statues that made history. This is by Alex von Tunzelmann, born in 1977. He's a British historian, screenwriter and author. Bit of everything. Oh, I beg your pardon, she worked primarily as a researcher and is of German ancestry, originating in Saxony in Germany, and that she has family connections from Estonia since 1600 and New Zealand since 1850. So that's quite interesting, the New Zealand connection, isn't it? She was educated at Brighton and Hove High School and read history at University College, Oxford. She wrote the script for the movie Churchill, which you may have seen, wonderful movie. A film that received mixed reviews. Shut up. That was a lovely movie. With some publications citing numerous historical inaccuracies. Yes, all right. So that's Fallen Idols by Alex von Tunzelmann. Very interesting lady. Next up is London's #1 dog walking agency. This is by Kate McDougall. In 2006, Kate McDougall always knew her heart wasn't really in her job at Sotheby's. So, after yet another breakage, this time of 2 precious porcelain pigeons, she had enough and walked out of her comfortable existence into the unknown world of the then nascent gig economy. Their gig economy are contracts on a short-term basis, if you didn't already know that. London's #1 dog walking agency is the story of her next 5 years and the dogs and people she meets along the way. There's Winston, the Labrador, who isn't allowed to get muddy, even after owners split up and then enlist Kate in their custody battle. There's Kate's long-suffering dog-agnostic boyfriend Finn and her mother, who is always on the alert for wedding bells and grandchildren. Amongst all this, there's Kate herself trying to work out what she wants from life and when and how to get there. So that's a neat sort of look into somebody's life, completely different life she leads, obviously, to what most of us lead. Kate McDougall is a freelance journalist who specialises in the countryside, lifestyle, interiors and all things dogs. She has written for The Telegraph, Country Life, Horse and Hound, Homes and Antiques and Period Living, amongst others. She grew up in Shropshire, has lived in London, Edinburgh and New York, but now lives in Oxfordshire with her husband, 3 children and 2 very naughty dogs. So that's London's #1 dog walking agency by Kate McDougall. Next is The Spirit of the Mountains, Alpine Adventures and Reflections by Ron Hay. So this is a beautifully illustrated combination of personal stories of alpine adventures over 5 decades and reflections on the spirituality of the mountain world. From student days to retirement, Ron Hay has found adventure and refreshment of spirit amid the peaks and valleys of the Southern Alps. A thoughtful, well-observed contemplation of 50 years of climbs, written with flair, appreciation for natural grandeur, the joy of shared times and nourishment of spirit imbibed during numerous days in the mountains. So that's The Spirit of the Mountains, Alpine Adventures and Reflections by Ron Hay. Ron Hay is a Kiwi who grew up in the south of New Zealand and has degrees in English literature and theology from Otago University. He was a secondary school teacher before entering the Anglican ministry. After ministry in South Canterbury and 15 years as vicar of Sumner Redcliffs Parish in Christchurch, he has devoted time to writing. He has contributed opinion pieces, book reviews and faith columns to the Christchurch Press. Finding the Forgotten God is his first book. He's married with 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren. His passions include tramping, I'm not surprised, climbing, photography and a variety of sports. So that's a real Kiwi, The Spirit of the Mountains by Ron Hay. And here's a complete change. This is The Commercial Hotel by John Summers. Now, when John Summers moved to a small town in the Wairarapa and began to look closely at the less celebrated aspects of local life, club rooms, freezing works, night trains, hotel pubs, landfills, he saw something deeper. It was a story about his own life, but mostly about a place and its people. The Commercial Hotel is a sharp-eyed, poignant yet often hilarious tour of Aotearoa, a place in which ark rock mugs and dog-eared political biographies are as much a part of the scenery as the hills we tramp through ill-equipped. We encounter Elvis impersonators, the eccentric French horn player and adventurer Bernard Shapiro, Norman Kirk balancing timber on his handlebars while cycling to his building site, and Summers' grandmother, the only woman imprisoned in New Zealand for protesting World War II. And we meet the ghosts who haunt our loneliest spaces. As he follows each of his preoccupations, Summers reveals to us a place we have never quite seen before. At least I haven't. I believe this is now the Ekatahuna Inn, the Commercial Hotel. Though without reading the book, which I haven't yet, I can't confirm that fact, as the blurb just mentions a small Wairarapa town. Still, I thought that very interesting, albeit a very small part of Wairarapa's history. John Summers lives in Wellington, and this is his second book. His first book was The Mermaid Boy, a collection of non-fiction stories, which was published in 2015. So, a local Kiwi boy talking about a small town in the Wairarapa, a pub called the Commercial Hotel, which some of you may know. I believe Ekatahuna. So yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Bit of local flavour. So that's about it for the non-fiction. So I've gone through some of the fiction and some of the non-fiction which is being introduced to the library in the coming months. But again, it's only a smattering. There are hundreds of books being introduced into all the libraries, probably thousands if we go through all the libraries. And there's 26 libraries connected to the smart library system, as I mentioned before. So all across the Wellington region. So right for now, I'm going to have a brief music interlude, and then when we come back, I'd like to talk about some of the books that I've been reading, which you might find interesting, and then we can go from there. So this is Enya singing Caribbean Blue from her Shepherd's Moons album. So if you bear with me while I work the technology here. Hi, so if you've just tuned in, my name is Steve Lillyston, and you're listening to Our Library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries all around Wairarapa to let you know about some of the new books coming into the library in the coming months so that you can get in there and reserve them if you're interested, if they pique your interest. In the first part of the program, I talked about some of the new fiction coming in, and in the second part, I talked about some of the non-fiction. So now in this part, I would just like to talk about some of the books that I've been reading, which you might find interesting. I have a very eclectic taste, I guess. I read a number of different genres from a number of different countries around the world. I don't tend to read a lot of non-fiction. I tend to read mostly fiction, but hopefully you'll find them interesting. In fact, I did read one non-fiction this time, which was interesting. Anyway, so here we go. Now, it's been 2 months since I've done this program, so normally I get through about 4 or 5 books a month, or I attempt 4 or 5 books a month. Over the past 2 months, we've been in lockdown, or semi-lockdown. I've read, or tried to read, 9 books. So let me just go through those with you. The first one I attempted was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. and I'm sorry, I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into it. A lot of people rave on Colson Whitehead's writing, and the Nickel Boys in particular, but I'm afraid it did nothing for me at all. I only managed a few pages. So it's one of those things that either resonates or it doesn't, and this one didn't. So that's the end of that story. The next one is The Virgin and the Whale by Carl Nixon. He's a Kiwi author. You may have heard of him. I've read and I've enjoyed his work before. The Tally Stick, which I read and I did a review on a previous program, I really enjoyed. This one I thought was excellent. It was centered around a nurse in 1919 working with an ex-soldier with PTSD from the First World War. Very different, but just nice writing, a lovely writer. He's a local writer. You might enjoy that, The Virgin and the Whale by Carl Nixon. I also read Later by Stephen King. Excellent sci-fi. All about a young man able to talk to recently deceased, helping solve crimes, etc. Stephen King, I have a love-hate relationship with Stephen King. Most of his work I've enjoyed, but there was a period there where I just didn't enjoy his work at all. But in the last 5 years or so, I've been reading his work again, and I'm really enjoying it. And I've just got out Billy Summers, which I might be talking about another time. So that's Stephen King, and it's called Later. Very interesting, lovely book. A Gambling Man by David Baldacci. Now, I've read a lot of David Baldacci's. He's a favourite of mine. But I didn't really enjoy this one. This was, he's written in a different style. He's written it in a stylised 50s Mickey Spillane type prose, and it just private detectives, big flash cars, swell gals, and all that sort of stuff. I suppose if it's your thing, if it resonates, but I didn't enjoy it, and I normally like David Baldacci's work. I think he's just trying something different, and for me it didn't work. But it wasn't horrible. I managed it, and sort of it was okay. The next one I tried was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and I just loved it. I thought that was fabulous. Like Matt Haig's work, I've read a few of his, and I'm really enjoying Matt Haig. Midnight Library is all about somebody dies, but they don't actually die. They end up in this library, and the library has all the possibilities of their lives, what they could have done if they'd taken this. It's like sliding doors. So what would have happened if they'd have taken this path or that path? So this lady gets to choose the path that she wants. Try this path, try that. And she tries different paths. It's really interesting. So she sort of gets reborn trying different lives. And it's fascinating. It's a lovely book. Real thought-provoking stuff. Interesting. Lovely book. Matt Haig, love his work. The next one was a Burning by Megha Majumdar, and that was all about India, set in India, all about politics, terrorism. It covered corruption, especially in politics. A harrowing read I've got here. It was tough to get through. It was a real. It was very, very, very hard to get through, but it was not hard in. I mean, I read it easily enough, but it was tough. It was tough stuff, but very, very good. And then for a complete switch around, I read A Dog's Promise. This is by W. Bruce Cameron, and follows on from his dog series, Dog's Purpose, A Dog's Journey. All harmless fun. It's all about dogs, funnily enough. And it's one of my favourite genres. I love books about dogs. And it's been made into, or the Dog's Promise, Dogs series has been made into movies. I think Dog's Promise was a Dog's Journey, Dog's Promise were movies. Really fun movies. He's a fun writer, W. Bruce Cameron. So I enjoyed that. Then I read Nala's World. Now, Nala's World, this is by Dean Nicholson, and it's this guy who is a Scot, and he goes, and this is a true story, and he goes on a trip around the world on his bicycle, and he ends up in Bosnia, I think it's Bosnia, Herzegovina or somewhere, and he finds a stray cat, and this cat, he adopts this cat, and it becomes his focal point then, and it's just a lovely story about him going around the world with this cat, and it changes him and changes his life basically, and makes a completely different life to the one he was going to be leading. Lovely, lovely book. That's Nala's World. Nala is the cat. Nala is also the female lion in Lion King, which you may remember. Anyway, so that's Nala's World by Dean Nicholson. And the book I've just finished is Afraid of the Light by Douglas Kennedy. Now, another author that I've read a lot of his stuff. I really enjoy Douglas Kennedy's work. All his books are different, but the connecting thread, I guess, is people and relationships and love-hate relationships, or love, really. And this one is set in California. A man loses his job, becomes an Uber driver. And then he gets involved in abortion-supporting activists, battling pro-life activists, domestic terrorists. I thought that was a gripping story. I just loved it. And I love Douglas Kennedy anyway. So that's Afraid of the Light, Douglas Kennedy. That's his latest book. Well, I think it's well worth a read, but I'm sort of biased because I think he's just fabulous. And I've just been to the library. The library's just got, they put on their Facebook page the boxes of books that have just come in, and there are hundreds of books that have just come in. And I've got a reservation list of 40 books, and 5 all came in at once. So I'm going through another Stephen King at the moment, and it's called Sully. It's called Sully? No, Billy Summers, beg pardon. Billy Summers. So I've just started it. Can't tell you much about it right now. But as I say, I'm on a love relationship with Stephen King at the moment, on our love-hate relationship meter. So I'll let you know next time what that's about. So I think that's enough for me. I've gone through the books that have come into the library, some of them anyway. And I hope you enjoyed that. So that's me. I'm Steve Lillyston. This was Our Library. It was a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries around Wairarapa to let you know about some of the many new books coming to the library in the coming months. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the show. Please tune in again next broadcast, which will be Friday, October 15th at 3:30 on Arrow 92.7 FM, your community access radio channel, and Wairarapa TV on Freeview Channel 41. So until then, happy reading. Bye-bye.